Thank you so much, Monica. It was great sitting backstage with Monica and listening to her great story. I loved particularly the story of the twins. And it was great to hear that wonderful music and to have this amazing gathering of women. I have to say that this is my favorite group of people to be speaking to because I feel this is our time and this is really the moment for women to fully step up to their own stage and not just change their lives, but transform the world. So it's really great to be here with you. For those of you who have not heard me before, this accent is for real. I say that because I joked recently during a speech that I was actually born in Fresno, California, and I said I cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, which is very popular everywhere except in Arizona. And I got 27 letters and emails from people asking me, how exactly did you go about changing your accent? And 2 of them were from Fresno, so there is a high level of gullibility in the world. Watch out. Of course, my accent has been something that has been the bane of my existence for many years. I don't know if you all have something about yourself that you don't like, but mine happened to be my accent. And it went on like that until I moved from England to the States, and I lived in New York, and I was introduced to Henry Kissinger one night, and he said to me, don't worry about your accent, I'm not going to try to imitate his. He said, you can never underestimate in American public life the advantages of complete and total incomprehensibility. So I relaxed after that. But actually, the truth is that each one of us has something that we don't like about ourselves, and part of the journey of really moving fearlessly into our own leadership potential is accepting that part of ourselves. So I want to divide what I want to say here today. I'm so sorry we have no question time because that's my favorite part, but I hope we can continue the conversation online. I'm going to give you my email address. And I would love to hear from you because honestly, that's what I love most about the Huffington Post, that we're a platform for many, many voices. And I love to hear from others, especially women and young women like I see here on at the first table. We have a great teen site for young women. So my email address is Arianna with 1 R and 2 N's at huffingtonpost.com. And my Twitter is at Arianna Huff. So you have no excuse not to stay in touch. So I want to divide what I want to say into 3 parts: the personal, the professional, and our involvement in the world. So starting with the personal, I think one of the biggest fears that we women face is the fear of failure. Now, men have that fear, but for women it becomes existential. We feel somehow that we need to do everything we are doing perfectly. And if we don't, we consider it a failure. I was blessed to have a mother who actually taught me that failure is not the opposite of success. She used to say failure is a stepping stone to success. So I remember when I wrote my second book, and I was in my mid-20s and living in London, and that book was rejected by 25 publishers. By that time, part of me felt, I probably need to choose a different profession. I had also run out of money. And I remember walking down St. James's Street feeling kind of rather depressed and wondering what I'm going to do with my life. And I saw a bank, Barclays Bank, and something made me go into the bank and, armed with nothing but a lot of Greek chutzpah, ask to see the bank manager. And he came out, I asked him for a loan, and believe it or not, he gave it to me. His name is Ian Bell, and I still send him a Christmas card every year. And it made me realize that very often in life, It's a little bit like in fairy tales, when you have the hero or the heroine lost in a dark forest, and suddenly there are all these helpful animals that come out and help them find their way out of the forest. Well, sometimes helpful animals in real life are disguised as human beings, or even bank managers. And that one bank manager made it possible for me to keep it all together for another 13 rejections until I finally got an acceptance. So very often, the difference between success and failure is perseverance. And I think it's very important for any woman who succeeds to talk about her failures, because very often people forget that you failed many times along the way. They think you just were born successful, and that's not the case for anybody. I remember when we launched the Huffington Post 7 years ago, you should have read the first day reviews. I remember one of them, I've learned it by heart. It said the Huffington Post is the movie equivalent as a failure of Gigli, Heaven's Gate, and Ishtar all rolled into one. And it went on like that. And then a year later, the woman who wrote that review reached out to me and said she had been wrong. The Huffington Post had become an indispensable part of the internet, and could she write for it? And I said, of course, because the worst thing you can do in life is hold grudges. That's the most poisonous thing anybody can do. And the problem is that very often, any kind of failure, any kind of naysaying from the outside makes us internalize it. There is that part, that voice in our head that I call the obnoxious roommate living in my head, which constantly puts us down. And you know, you all have it, we all have it. Men have it too, but men can shut it up and go and watch a football game. Women have to wrestle it into the ground. And I learned to work with that voice with a lot of humor. Until now, I say thank you for sharing, and I move on. But that voice, you know, starts early in the morning when you look in the mirror and the voice goes, what happened? You know, I see a couple of wrinkles here. Did you sleep on the wrong side of the pillow? Or you're going to put on a pair of jeans and the voice goes, what happened? Did you throw these in the dryer? I don't know about your voice, but my obnoxious roommate is incredibly snarky. In fact, I was recently on Colbert's show, and I said to Stephen Colbert, you know, Stephen, I said, my obnoxious roommate sounds exactly like you. And he said I had to find a place to crash. So the obnoxious roommate is tied in with negative fantasies. You know, when you look ahead and you fantasize about everything going wrong, like your child is late, coming back, and immediately you are fantasizing them in the emergency room. Or somebody looks at you askance in the office, you are imagining you're being fired. You know, Montaigne, the French writer, said, there were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened. So, you know, the theme of this conference is imagine. But let's use imagination to really dream about good things happening, because that's how we can begin to create them. And let's not allow the luxury of a negative fantasy, because we can't afford the luxury of negative fantasies. They are too draining and too exhausting and too completely unnecessary. And the same applies to our personal lives, because, you know, after all, we cannot exactly divide our personal lives from our professional lives. You know, if we're going through a divorce, a breakup, a sick child, it's going to affect us. We're human beings, we're not robots. So the question is, how do we deal with integrating all the parts in our life? I remember, for example, one of my heartaches was in my 20s when I fell in love with this man whom I fell in love with him before I met him. Has that ever happened to you? I fell in love with his writing. He used to write for the London Times. I used to cut his columns out and underline them and practically put them in a book between pressed flowers. And finally I met him, And, you know, he was twice my age and half my size, but love is blind. And we ended up together for 7 years. By then I was 30, and I desperately wanted to have children. He only wanted to have cats. So I decided that that was it. I was going to leave him, which was incredibly fearful at the time, because I really loved him and wanted to be with him, but I wanted to have children more. So I didn't trust myself to stay in London and be with him or not be with him. So I left and moved to America. So the reason I moved from London to New York, which led to everything else happening in my life, my children, the Huffington Post, being here speaking in front of you today, happened because a man wouldn't marry me. So remember that when things go badly. It may be precisely what you need in order for other things to go right. And that's very important to remember. And if you look back at your own life, I bet you're going to find examples like mine. And if you have children, I want you to tell your daughters that, because when you see what happens to young women now, when they go through a hard time, they think this is it, this is the end. And they need to remember it is not. It may be the beginning of something much greater than what they have right now. So that brings us to our professional lives. And this is really something that I'm obsessed about right now. I feel this is the moment when we women need to redefine what success is. We need to stop adopting the male definition of success, which is climbing up the ladder at whatever cost to our health, our relationships, our families, and ourselves. As Sheryl Sandberg says, it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. So you may suddenly decide to take a detour and go somewhere to the right or to the left, and somebody from the outside may think this is not getting up the ladder, but it may be exactly what you love. And you know, I must say, I want women to be able to do anything and be paid as much down to the last penny as men are paid, but I don't care if we don't have 50% of women be CEOs. I personally would hate to be a CEO. I would not be happy. So why is this suddenly the objective? I want women to be able to do whatever makes them happiest, whatever makes them most fulfilled, whatever gives them the most rewarding experience of going through life. And I want that to be their own choice. I don't want that to be anybody else's choice. And I don't want our society to decide what is valued and what is not valued. Because then we go back, we regress. And also, I want us to do success differently. You know, driving ourselves into the ground, sleep deprivation, forgetting to eat right. All that is not healthy. It's not healthy for ourselves, it's not healthy for our families, it's not healthy for our corporations. And if you look at the data, it's very depressing. Women who are career women have a 40% greater incidence of heart disease and heart attacks. They are more likely to be obese, 60% greater likelihood of being diabetic. These are not numbers that we can accept. And for me, it starts with something very simple. Are you prioritizing yourself? Are you taking care of yourself before you take care of anybody else? And that means, are you guys and girls getting enough sleep? I have a piece today. LinkedIn started a new influencer series, and my piece today is called How to Sleep Your Way to the Top, Literally. And I came to this realization the hard way. 4.5 years ago, I fainted from exhaustion. I hit my head on my desk, I broke my cheekbone, I got 4 stitches on my right eye, and it started me on this journey of rediscovering sleep, balance, and integrating my life. So I want you to come to this realization before you hit your head on your desk. And now I've become a bit of an expert on sleep. In fact, last year I was asked by the Harvard School of Medicine Sleep Division if I would join their board, which I've done, because wherever I go, I speak about sleep. And I'm just going to give you, we have a dedicated section on the Huffington Post on sleep, so please go and find out all the medical evidence about it and why it matters. And why it matters, not just for your health, but for your effectiveness and your creativity. Remember a day when you go through the day like a zombie, exhausted? Isn't it horrible? And don't you, I mean, I make bad decisions on a day like that. I'm more reactive. Whatever happens affects me more. And sometimes when I look around at the world, I see all these men with very high IQs and great degrees leading companies and making terrible decisions. What they're lacking is not IQ, but wisdom. And I think we need to reconnect with our own wisdom if we're going to be great leaders. Sometimes I think to myself, you know what, if Lehman Brothers was Lehman Brothers and Sisters, they might still be around today. You know, maybe some Lehman sister would have woken up refreshed after a good 7 or 8 hours sleep and seen the iceberg that was about to hit the Titanic. Because isn't that what leadership is? To be able to see around corners, to be able to see what's coming, to be able to tap into the zeitgeist and know what's next. And there is a great line by the writer Nicholas Carr that I love that I want to read to you. He says, "There needs to be time for efficient data collection and time for inefficient contemplation, time to operate the machine and time to sit idly in the garden." So whatever the sitting idly in the garden is for you, we need to incorporate it into our daily lives. And we are going to be much more effective leaders as a result. If you read the biography of any great leader, whether it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Winston Churchill, they talk about the importance of meditation or napping or taking time away from all their devices. In Bill Gates' case, for an entire week out of every year, going to a cabin without anything to distract them from really thinking and imagining. You know, you have the great theme of the conference, imagine. It's very hard to do imagining when you're attached to your devices. And please, if I may say one thing that I would love to take with you today, never, ever sleep with your devices next to your bed. Because there's medical evidence that if you wake up to go to the bathroom, whatever, and you are tempted to look at your data, your sleep, even if you go back to sleep, is not going to be the same recharging sleep. So what's the big urgency? Charge them in another room. Charge them as far away as possible. And if you want to tell me that you need them as an alarm clock, go buy a $25 alarm clock. There are some great ones at Pottery Barn. They look very vintage. I gave them to my friends for Christmas. No excuses. So the truth is that, you know, I live my life in a world of technology. And maybe that's why I realize that even though I love social media, I love being connected, I also recognize the need to disconnect in order to reconnect with ourselves. Otherwise, we are going to be fried and our children are going to be fried. You see children who cannot communicate anymore without looking at their devices, are sitting next to each other and texting. We have to stop that. We have to reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with those around us. Otherwise, we are going to be the slaves of technology rather than the masters of technology. And let me end with the third and final part. And this is that we all have a big responsibility in trying to make the world better. This is a very, very difficult, challenging time we are going through, with over 23 million people unemployed or underemployed. This is a time when we cannot just wait for Washington to come up with solutions, where we need to be part of the solution. And if anybody here thinks that maybe they are too small to be effective, all I have to say is that you have not spent a night in bed with a mosquito. Nobody is too small to be effective. And this is where social media have a big role to play, because now everybody can have a voice. Whatever it is that you're doing, whether, like Leslie, you are working on breast cancer awareness, or like Stanford, you are doing this great work with children, teaching them music. Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you love, you can share it with the world. And that's one of my favorite things about running the Huffington Post. You know, we are a journalistic enterprise. We won a Pulitzer this year. We have 800 journalists, editors, engineers all around the world. But my favorite thing is that we are also a platform. And as a platform, we can have thousands of people share what they want to share with the world, provided they clear a quality bar. It's not a free-for-all. But if you want to say anything, if you want to write about anything, any cause, any idea that you want to share, we are there. And that, for me, is a way that leaders are born. And my favorite stories are stories of what happens to people who do that, like the homeless teenager who blogged on our HuffPost teen site, and Harvard happened to read her blog and got in touch with us to connect them with her and offered her a placement at Harvard this year. And there are endless stories like that, and that's, for me, the best part of technology and social media, that nobody needs to be silent and nobody needs to be hidden anymore. And in the 90s, I wrote a book called The Fourth Instinct, by which I meant that beyond the first three instincts of survival, sex, and power, there is that fourth instinct, the instinct to find meaning in life, to make sense of life, to make a contribution to life. And I feel this instinct is paramount at the moment. And when we include it in our lives, everything else falls into place, and we become less worried about every little thing that happens during a day. Because we've all discovered by now that every day consists of good things and bad things happening. So how we feel about our day depends on how much we can focus on our gratitude and on the blessings in our lives instead of focusing on what is not working. So let me just end by saying that this is an amazing time to be alive. And I believe that as women, we can really go out in the world, redefine success both for ourselves and for men who desperately need our leadership in redefining success. And at the same time, we can do it all in our own lives, in our own careers, while changing the world with more gratitude, more peace, more acceptance, and yes, more sleep.